Hello there YouTube, we are back with a special video for you all today. Today's video is going to be a follow-up to the deck profile that we had just put up a little while ago that went over my take on the yellow Vaccine Armours list. I would highly recommend watching that video first because in that video I went over my deck list covering ratios, my tech choices, and really hoping to give you guys a foundation on how the deck wants to work, how it wants to function, and sort of what the the spine of the deck is like. This video in essence is going to shift focus just a little bit and hope to provide you all with a resource and how-to guide on how to approach this deck that is already being labeled as the big bogeyman of the meta and probably one of the best, if not the best deck in format. So going up against Magnamon X and reading all that it does and what it can do can most definitely be very intimidating and very daunting. But at the end of this video, I do hope that I'm able to break it down for you guys in a way that, you are able to see more clarity to it. You're able to see sort of ways to approach it and really just find some success against this deck, right? The whole point of this video is really just to help break this down for you guys, help give you guys a starting point on how you want to craft ways to counter it, how to play against it, and what to watch out for if you are going up a Vaccine Armours player, whether it be at locals, casually, or at a regionals or ulti cup. Last bit of administrative talk before we jump into the main part of the video. If you do enjoy our content, you like what you see, and you want to keep supporting the channel, please do consider hitting that like and subscribe button. I'll also drop our socials, which includes our Discord, our Instagram, our Twitter, etc. in the video description down below. So please, do consider checking those out. We would greatly appreciate it. But enough jibber jabber on my end. Let's hop right into the main part of the video now. Now let's take some time to talk about this deck in general, what it likes to do, what are some previous inspirations for it, and what the overall game plan of the deck is. We really saw Armours as a deck come out from the Vmon Armours variant that we saw really started in BT-8 and saw a resurgence of this in the BT-14 and 15 meta with the release of the new Terriermon starter deck and the new starter deck Magnamon that we had. The build focuses on Magnamon X as its main win con while utilizing some older support pieces and the low to the ground Vmon armor package to not just turbo into your Magnamon X, but also help keep it on the board while constantly activating its all turns effect and utilizing these smaller armor rush bodies to continuously deal damage and chipping away your opponent's life. Vaccine Armours is very similar in that the main focus is to get into Magnamon X and utilize typical yellow vaccine shenanigans to activate its ever so powerful all turns and when digivolving effect to really just suffocate your opponent, take them out of the game while you continue to chip away at their security. The main difference here between Vmon Armours and Vaccine Armours is that you're going to be utilizing the more powerful armor cards in the game in both Rapidmon from BT-8 as well as Rapidmon from Starter Deck 17 to really just abuse the fact that Magnamon X is also a vaccine in trait too. So that all said, you can really just turbo into this big guy, utilize it as a big body that your opponent can't deal with, and really just chip away at them and take them out of the game. As such, you are then able to use BT-14 Patamon, BT-14 TK, as well as Emissary of Hope and Awakening of the Golden Knight from BT-9 to once again turbo into your Magnamon X, utilize control pieces in Rapidmon and Shine Greymon Ruin mode to lock your opponent out of the game. It's an extremely powerful deck that can really deal damage quickly, but also at the same time take the opponent out of the game and just suffocate them of their resources. The potential to raise Patamon, digivolve into an armor form with the vaccine trait, and subsequently go into Magnamon X turn 2 is absolutely insane and can make the game feel extremely accelerated and really fast. Once Magnamon X is established onto the board, utilizing your Tamers will enable your all turns effect to proc, and then you can subsequently activate your when digivolving effect continuously in this sort of loop to make it very difficult for your opponent to deal with this big body and puts you in a very good spot to just take control of the game and be in the driver's seat for the remainder of the round. Now, the big question that most people will have coming into this meta will be, how do we play against this, right? We've already talked about how stifling this card is. Well, how do we go about it? How do we counter it? A lot of us are going into this competitive season asking ourselves if we're just going to end up playing this deck, which is arguably the best deck in the format, or find a way around it. I will say, for as much as I give it sort of hype and have gassed this deck up, the general game plan is really not that complicated for Vaccine Armours. The goal is to have that early big play where you can get into your big guy, and then you're pretty much trying to keep your foot on the gas pedal for the remainder of the game. I think there are 3 scenarios that you do have to recognize and be able to capitalize on if you do want to do well against this deck, and we're going to break it down for you guys over here. Scenario 1 is that you don't see a Patamon in raising, right? Your opponent is either stuck digivolving into another level 3 in the back, or even like a BT-16 Ukamon or something else, right? Here you should recognize that Rapid or Gold Vidramon will cost 4 to Evo or 3 to Evo respectively on top of that rookie. Or like I said, if they have Ukamon, they're stuck essentially waiting an additional turn before they can Evo into another yellow card, right? Seeing this should be a good sign for you to say essentially you have an extra turn to either push aggression, which is what I recommend playing into any yellow vaccine deck, or try to keep establishing your tamers or your pieces so that when you do pull off your play, it's as efficient and as effective as possible. One point I will like to make is that going up against yellow vaccine, it's always a good idea to try to be aggressive early and chip away at their security, which is why decks like Numemon and Sukamon do really well, because they do push that low to the ground, high tempo aggression, and early security damage, because as a vaccine player, if you're trying to utilize Patamon and Emissary of Hope, well, surprise, you can't utilize those 2 effects if you don't have security, right? So essentially by chipping away at security, you're taking away their chances of hitting and doing what they want to do. Scenario 2, Patamon is raised, but they whiff. Your eyes should also light up here because more often than not, they're once again forced to either Evo for a more expensive cost into a Rapid or Gold Vidra and hopefully pass turn. Or if they do this, they may end up just searching, digging for more pieces, which is even more of a oofta on their end because now they're sort of pushed back a turn or 2. If they do end up doing this, this is once again your signal to try to push aggression and really try to control their board state. Decks like Mirage or V Armors have multiple ways to get rid of level 4s on the board without necessarily doing battle and activating an ace play. But that idea is still the same, as you really want to be able to try and continue setting up, but more importantly, find a way to get rid of the body that is stuck on the board and force them to restart and set them back a turn or 2, which sometimes is truly just enough momentum you need to take the front foot and take control of the game. Scenario 3, they raise a Patamon and they hit, right? They either go into a Rapidmon or a Gold Vidramon, but unfortunately for them, that's where the train stops. They're not able to hit the Magnamon X play, and they have to keep digging and finding pieces to go into it, or they just have to go into another body, right? If they end up going into Rapidmon X, I'm honestly fine with that, because for me, yes, Rapidmon X is very strong and very powerful, but is much more manageable than Magnamon X is, right? I can deal with Rapidmon X in multiple ways. Magnamon X, there are very few ways and very nuanced ways for me to deal with it, and it's that much harder to get it off the board. So if I see that they go into Rapid and are forced to go into Rapid X, I'm fine with that, because now, again, I have another turn or 2 to prepare for Magnamon X. Another decision that you're going to have to make here is, whether you want to raise or stay in the back, right? I think depending on your deck, I think that this is a variable answer, but essentially you should be asking yourself, am I in danger of being gamed next turn, or do I have an extra turn to survive? In my opinion, if they haven't searched into a Magnamon X, or they haven't played into it, they clearly don't have it, right? Because if you have it in hand, your best play is almost always trying to get into it. So if they have not gone into it, they clearly don't have it. So they may need another turn to keep searching and digging for it. So I usually feel pretty safe pushing up and trying to establish a presence onto the board state. If you do end up staying in the back, I will say the one thing you should always consider is the Ruin Mode play. If they are lucky to go into a Magnamon X, and for whatever reason choose to Ruin Mode, you want to be above that 6k DP threshold to push up and at least have a turn. Otherwise, you're kind of stuck in the water and kind of watching them go for game. The next thing I do want to talk about really quickly, and this is a shout out to TJ and Sunny because they were the ones who really opened my eyes to this and really pushed for it, is Digimon Emperor. Digimon Emperor is a card that a lot of folks have been running lately in SecCon. mainly because it forces your opponent to be mindful of how they raise and when they raise. They are taxed for raising a level 3, which if you're going up against Yellow Vaccine, their game plan revolves around pushing up Patamon, which is a level 3. If they can't utilize Patamon as a free Evo, they're forced again to stay in the back, go into a Rapidmon or Gold Vidramon for an inefficient cost, and really just sets them back a turn. And they're afraid to do so. Sometimes having like 2 or 3 Digimon Emperor out just shuts Yellow Vaccine out completely because they can't push their Patamon. They're forced to kind of climb up in a traditional sense, and that just makes them so much more slow and inefficient, right? So I think Digimon Emperor is a huge tech that if you can run it in your deck, you try to do so. Sunny has cooked up a list where he's teched Digimon Emperor into Tyrant. You know, Security Control will always run Digimon Emperor, although you could argue that Security Control has a very, very rough matchup this format. But I think low to the ground decks, if you can sprinkle in 1 or 2 of Digimon Emperor, I say go for it. It's definitely worth running, I think, in a format that's going to be seeing a lot of Vaccine Armours. Now, I hear you guys in the sense that Digimon and TCGs in general are very hard to map out play by play, especially in a deck that is varied or tech choice dependent as Yellow Vaccine. But I do think that the 3 aforementioned scenarios are ones that you'll see when encountering this deck, and I think can provide a good framework on how to go up against this deck and how to string your plays along. Being able to recognize when you need to make certain plays and when you have time versus when you don't, I think is something that I realized is part of growing and getting better as a player. And with the game becoming more and more power crept as more sets come out and more powerful cards come out, I do think you really need to be on your A game to beat decks like this one. Ultimately, as the game progresses, I do think that Magnamon X gives your opponent a bit more of an advantage, because unless you can set up your blockers or find ways to bypass their blocking effect, you're really only going to be finding one way to deal damage to them, which they shut down almost immediately, right? So I do believe that your window of opportunity lies more so in the beginning or like middle of the match, which is why I outline these scenarios above so that you can see this, be able to take advantage of this, and hopefully try to put yourself on the front foot and be in control, because as soon as you give that reins of control to the Magnamon X or Vaccine player, it's a huge uphill battle that you're gonna have to do, and you're gonna really have to rely on certain tech pieces within your deck to save you, and that already is a gamble that, you know, most players aren't willing to take. Once again, you know, I think one strategy thing that I will point out is that you do want to try and chip away at security as early and as often as possible. I said this earlier, but I think in doing so, you give your opponent less targets to Evo in from security. Remember that this variant of Yellow Vaccine, the Armours Vaccine variant, is not as focused on recovery as other traditional variants of Yellow Vaccine are. Outside of Magnamon Ace and Emissary of Hope, there really isn't a consistent way for them to recover. So if you can deplete their security stores quickly, you have a better chance of ensuring a whiff on Patamon and really slow your opponent down and slow their game plan down. Another point to keep in mind is that once it hits the field, unless you're running into Mad Lads running like Shu Yulin, Zubagon Punch from the V Armors sort of variant, you're not going to be OTK'd that particular turn, right? Magnamon X is essentially a big beater that doesn't die, and it's very difficult to overcome and remove, but it doesn't OTK you. It'll swing, it'll chip away, but you do have a turn or two to try to string some plays along. So, you know, don't panic is what I'm trying to say, right? Don't panic in thinking that once you see Magnamon X, you have to make a play. Sometimes it's better to be patient, make sure you find the right pieces to counter, and then act at the right time, which once again is why I outlined those scenarios above. Now, on that note, you know, let's talk about some decks that will allow you to do this and give you the best chance at taking this big meta Chad out. Tyrant Kabuterimon and the Bugs deck are most definitely going to be a strong counter to Magnamon X. The idea of Tyrant is to build a huge wall that is insanely difficult to overcome, and with access to cards like Shiva, you also get the ability to turn off options, which just entirely takes away their ability to utilize Emissary of Hope or Awakening to climb into Magnamon X in the first place, which again just further protects your Tyrant Kabuterimon. And if you can establish Tyrant early and just build sort of a huge wall, it really becomes a huge grind fest that over time just pushes more and more in your favor. So Tyrant is definitely a deck to watch out for. The next deck is Imperial Dramon, where Source Strip is a great counter to Magnamon X in that if you take away their armor sources within that small window of time where they are still vulnerable to effects, you can take away the ability to activate their when digivolving effect, and Fighter Mode Ace is also just an excellent counter to try to bait them into swinging while you have an established level 5 or Dragon Mode on the field. With Imperial as well, you're going to be running a lot of removal options that will help, such as Mega Death and Giga Death, that are both hand and security options that can really just mess their game plan up. Next up is War Greymon and Black War Greymon. As we have seen on some match play commentary videos that we have on the channel recently, Black War Grey and War Grey can deal some damage to Magnamon X. They are one of the few decks that can just smack Magnamon in the face with the raid mechanic and work towards deleting them with Black War Grey's ability to reboot and pop a certain body on the board and force them to armor purge at the beginning of their turn when their protection has fallen off, right? It will struggle to their usual sort of brick and inconsistency, and I still feel that, it is a bit slower in tempo where Vaccine Armours can just outpace them. But that being said, it still has the tools to deal with it, so I do feel that it has a good chance of making a small comeback, and we're going to see a few players try to top with it. It'll probably sneak in there every now and then and kind of do some work. The next deck and the last deck we're going to talk about is one that's a little bit biased for me in Mirage Galgamon. I think it is a very good and very doable matchup against Magnamon X. We received a new level 4 to gain in Archetype Jamming and another means of turboing into BT-11 Mirage. The BT-13 Mach Galgamon is also going to be your main MVP, as it will allow you to avoid redirection for the turn. Note that this card does not just mean your level 5 gets that effect, it's your entire stack for that turn, meaning that you can evo into Mirage or even go into a burst mode that same turn, and as long as you have kept turn and survived with that Mach Gal swing, the entire stack cannot be redirected until your turn is over, which really just helps you push that aggression and helps time your OTK play even more effectively. On top of that too, you have cards that you have access to in BT4 Mirage Galgamon that can't be blocked, and cards like Zudomon Ace and EX4 Mach Galgamon allow you to strip and bounce level 4s that, again, just help you establish a board presence and slow down their potential armor plays, and does a good job at stifling their game plan. And that's essentially going to wrap up the video, everybody. So thank you all for tuning in and watching. I hope this helps everybody out there, find a good starting platform on how to deal with the new Holy Warrior on the block. Because as we mark the official release of BT-16, we're really going to be seeing this deck a whole lot, and it's going to be rampant. It's very, very strong, and the V Armors variant is probably just as strong and as aggressive. But at the end of the day, I do think that if you play your decks well, you see the right plays, you're able to visualize certain scenarios and anticipate, you can overcome this deck and beat it. There are many tools out there to utilize, and I think it's truly just being able to recognize these tools and use them in the right way and at the right time. And that will essentially wrap up the video, everybody. So thank you all for tuning in and watching. I hope this helps everybody sort of find their own foundation and platform on how to start theory crafting and going up against the new Holy Warrior on the block. Like I said earlier, this deck is going to be very, very strong, and the V Armors variant is also probably just as strong and aggressive. But at the end of the day, I do think that if you play your decks well and you recognize the right plays, you can overcome these decks and beat them. There are many tools out there to utilize, and I think it's truly just about recognizing and knowing when to use them and how to use them effectively as possible. So let me know what you guys think of this video. I know this is a little bit of a different one that we usually do. If there's a deck or a archetype that you want to see like a similar discussion about on how to play it, how to counter it, and how to beat it, drop it in the comment section down below. We're always welcome to new ideas, and we would love to just keep giving you content that you all enjoy. So if there's something that's, in the back of your mind, or you kind of come up against this deck in locals and you just don't know how to beat it, let us know. One of us probably knows how to do it, and we'll try to get that video out there for you guys. So thank you all for tuning in once again. I appreciate every one of you guys. Truly, all the support and all the kind words mean a whole lot. So can't thank you guys enough, and I hope to see you on the next video. Catch you on that flippy flip. Bye-bye.